clean this up in editing later, maybe. We're just kind of fiddling with the settings right now. Okay. We're going to try to record a screen sharing lecture where I give you a little bit of audio assistance with a PowerPoint that I've put together on our last topic. The PowerPoint's no good, and there's nothing pretty about it. You guys could all do better on a class project. It's just data right now, and probably not very well. It's probably not as clear as it could be. It's mostly just notes to help you follow along with what I'm going to be saying. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to some screen sharing so you don't have to look at my face anymore, and we're going to get started. I think we're going to aim for about 20 minutes here. We'll see how it goes. I want to share this. There we go. And we're going to go ahead and start that presentation. All right, you guys should be able to see me going along here. I'm going to read through it and hopefully be able to lecture as I go. We shall see. So the four last things we are now going to talk about: death and the meaning of life, and heaven and hell, and who makes it and who doesn't. It is a topic we've really brought up since the beginning of the year. It featured in the very first thing I had you read from St. Anselm. It featured in what we said about faith when we came back to that later in the semester with the 7 points of the Catechism on faith. Some of that's going to be familiar. It really has been the thing we've been building to all year. It's what the work of Christ, of his satisfying work, his saving work, is supposed to bring about for us. So we're going to take a look at the four last things. What are they? In English, we call them the four last things. If you want the fancy word, it's eschatology. Just as fancy as all the other Greek words we have looked at this year, which is to say not actually fancy in Greek. Eschatology is from the Greek word eschata, meaning last things. So it literally is the study of last things, final things. In Latin, it would be ultima instead of eschata, right? And the four last things are death, judgment, heaven, and hell. There are four and only four last things when we mean that word in Catholic theology. And don't, at the moment, ask me about things like purgatory. We will get there in the future in a week or two. We'll see how long that's going to take. Really what we're interested in is the process of how we become or fail to become partakers in the divine nature. So we're not just interested in some final point in history. We're interested in the meaning of life and theologically last things. Yes, they're the last things in our life, in our storyline, and they are also the last things in the entire storyline of the human race. But they're also final. They're the end. They're the goal in some sense, or the getting to the goal, the ways of looking at the goal and getting to the goal. So what we're going to start with, and this lecture will only be about this, probably for maybe 2 lectures, is a natural theology of death. We're going to go back to some of the things we did at the beginning of the year. So I don't want to click there. Some of the things we did at the beginning of the year. The first mover argument, the convertibility of transcendentals. We're going to try to do that again, but from the back end. And we're going to mostly riff off of something written by St. Augustine, or a number of things written by St. Augustine. So this is point 1. This is the big one. We might be on this slide for a little bit. Let's see how this goes. So the title on that slide, Man's Natural Desire for God, that's actually not quite right. That's a heresy, technically. We can't call it a natural desire. But if you go back and look at the convertibility of transcendentals, that argument that we gave way, way back in October of, all the good is what all desire. All things desire their own perfection. The thing is perfect insofar as it's actual insofar as it's being, and all that sort of thing. One of the consequences of that argument that we didn't really look at then, I might have mentioned it, is this. God is our ultimate perfection. we ran the argument in another direction. We were at the time just trying to show that God is good, capital G good, in a way that transcends good in the way you mean it in the universe, any particular good thing. All of those senses of good are grounded in the way God is transcendently good. But actually, this is an equally important idea, I think, and now we need it. Because ultimately, everything that we're desiring, whether it's pie or a good job or lots of money or someone to love you or whatever, ultimately, all of those goods that we pursue are aimed at a final last good. Our ultimate perfection is in God. Our ultimate perfection is not to eat lots of food and, grow up and just become a full-bodied animal and have sex and reproduce and, extend the species. That's part of what we are. But that's not really our last end. So we get this important line here: God is man's last end. We will use this extensively for the rest of your time studying theology at St. Anselm's. When we say that God is the last end, he's the ultimate why of everything that we do. If we try to, if we ask the question, why are you doing something? Don't worry for a minute about the things that you do for no good reason, right? Which obviously is most of what you do. But when you're being purposeful, when you're being rational, when you're acting voluntarily, you have some kind of goal. Why are you doing that? Well, it might be, like why are you studying in this class? It's probably not because studying for this class is the sum total of all of the happiness that you could ever have in life. It's to accomplish something. It's for some further end. So you study in religion class in order to get good grades, and you get good grades in order to graduate with a high GPA. And if I keep asking why, you can keep giving me some more and more remote goal as to why you're doing it. Well, why do you want to do that? I don't know, because I want to go to college and get a degree. Why do you want to do that? Because I want a job. And why do you want that job? Well, I want to make a lot of money. And well, why do you want a lot of money? At a certain point, just like in the first mover argument, you can't move backwards. You can't have an infinite regress of causes or movers. You actually can't have an infinite regress of final causes either. That's the technical term here. You can't have an infinite regress of whys for what you're doing. Eventually, you will get to a why that doesn't have a why after it. And the generic term for that why is actually happiness. It's your last end. At a certain point, the answer to why are you doing that is because I think it will make me happy somehow. And if I ask, well, why do you want to be happy? Suddenly that doesn't really mean a lot. That's quite a bit more mysterious a question. You could try to answer it. We could play the game for a second. Why do you want to be happy? Because I don't know. I think I'll like it. But, or maybe because, I don't know, because people have always told me that it's good. Well, why do you want to do what people always tell you? I don't know, because I guess it'll make me happy. You'll get stuck in a kind of infinite spin of answering the question of why with happiness somehow. A big part of ethics is based on the idea that God is that final happiness, that last end. We're not going to reconstruct that whole argument here. We don't really need it, but we just need this basic line here that God is our last end. When we say that last final goal for all that we do, we actually just mean God. That's what God is. That's part of what we mean here. Our desire for God doesn't actually work the same way as our desire for food or for sleep or for free time or for sex or for fame or for wealth or whatever you want to pick as your good. Particular desires are sort of obvious to us. Some are more obvious than others. Sometimes you can want a thing and not quite realize that you want it. But in some way, our appetite, our desire for the thing, and the thing, they kind of fit together. This one, it's less clear. This is the desire that is implicit in every other desire. Even when you do evil, even when you're doing something really, really, really wicked, ultimately you're doing it because you think it'll make you happy. You're wrong. It will not make you happy, at least not in the final sense. But it is why you do everything. It's why sinners sin. That's why saints don't. We all have it. So it's our master drive that makes sense of everything else. We're constantly in pursuit of this final end. There's a famous quotation, and I think I forgot to put it in the next slide. I meant to have its own page. I'll just say it now, and maybe I'll supply the text for you later. It's a famous quotation from St. Augustine. I had to memorize it when I was a student. You should probably memorize it this year as well. The quotation, somewhat modified for grammar, for being pulled out of context, is, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you." There will never be an end to our desires, to our wanting, to our search for fulfillment until we arrive at our last end. That's what it means for it to be the last end. It means that that search is over. We are a seeker by nature, and the final solution to that seeking is just God. Hopefully you can see how this is just the flip side of the first mover argument. The first mover argument, we are trying to trace our way to more and more fundamental levels of reality that cause things, move things, give rise to things. We're looking for a first origin. Now we're doing the exact same thing, but we're going in the other direction. We're looking to a final end or goal. The first mover argument was based on the idea that you're in motion somehow, right? Things are in motion. You're one of them. And from that motion, we can come to a beginning. There must be a beginning to motion. Well, as it turns out, if we're going to do a real analysis of change or action or motion, motion must also have an end. Motion is actually defined by end more than it is by beginning. That's more of an ethics thing. It's more of an 11th grade topic. But just for now, if you're visualizing the first mover argument as working your way down, down, down to more basic levels of reality, to a first source of all things, now just understand that this whole desire argument, the convertibility argument, the direction we're going with it, is heading off toward a final thing, a last end. So what can we do with all of that? I mean, it's this basic idea of man as a seeker, man has a last end, God is our last end. The rest of this slide series is going to be about what else you can get out of that. The slide here shows you 4 things. We could say them all in a couple of different ways. This search, this constant drive for our end and our search for our end. It's not obvious how to get it. Right? We're moving around looking for it. It doesn't just fall into our laps, and we don't just accidentally end up there. How do we end up there? This idea of us being seekers ends up driving lots of human behavior, all human behavior. And the 4 parts of it that I want to look at are on the right side of the screen here. We can talk about why there are religions and what religious activity is. What are we doing when we go to church or whatever our kind of religious experience is? And I don't just mean Christianity, I mean any religion that's ever existed. So we could be talking about Canaanites, and we could be talking about Shinto or primitive Shintoism. We could talk about Vedic religions. We talk about anything, any at all. And we'll get to that in a minute. But also, this is all bound up with the meaning of life. I mean, in some sense, what we're trying to say is God is the meaning of life, but how? And what does that look like? And how do we know that? How can we see how that works outside of just pointing at the convertibility argument, hoping that it works? Maybe most importantly, what does that end look like? What is it going to be like to reach that end? How do you imagine it? How do you describe it? And then finally, this 4th one's kind of hard to put into words. It'll be clearer, I think, when we get to the slides. But how does this whole drive toward our last end, how does it relate to all the goods that we value in this life? What do we do here to achieve it? How do the things that we're doing now have anything to do with it? Now that one will hopefully make more sense when we arrive in that slide. So we're gonna have 1 or 2 slides on each of these. History of religions, and again, all religions. This isn't obviously the only thing you could say about religious activity and where they come from. It's common for us now, and probably for you guys, to think about religions as a topic of sociology or just of history. Like it's a group of humans doing something. And probably you all have the basic hidden assumption that we create them. And in part, that might be correct. We're trying to do a natural theology here, so we actually need to be a little agnostic for the moment about where they come from. But you can relate religious activity to this man is a seeker thing. It's going to let us explain a lot about it, I think. So the main idea here is, because of the convertibility argument, we're not looking at particular desires or particular goods, meaning things that you happen to like that I don't, or things that are good for some people and not for others. When you get to the end, to the last end, you're now talking about an end that is universal. Everyone has it as the same end. There's no exception to that. So some people like eggs, some people don't. Some people like bacon, some people don't. That's crazy, but these people exist for some reason. I don't know why God allows them to exist, but they do. Some people like cold showers on a hot day, and some people rightly think that's horrible. Some people shower in the evening, some people shower at night. You can play lots of silly games with this on how the different kinds of likes are particular to some people. You can also have groups of people, right? So entire cultures could be defined in terms of what they like or don't like. These, some people have a fixation on really healthy teeth and some people don't. There's all kinds of weird ways that desires and goods are not shared or universal. But for this one, we're talking about one that is truly universal. Like even beyond the level of things like oxygen is good for humans, right? Or like smoking is bad for you. Those are pretty universal, but you could at least imagine some sort of weird exception. Someone who has some sort of really weird biological disorder, so that, I don't know, they're allergic to oxygen. I don't know, something strange. It's bad for them somehow. And here we have one that truly transcends all of that. Our last end is a shared good. It's a truly universal good. It's a common good, not a private good. Part of what that means is that we seek it together. It's not just a matter of individual fulfillment. We exist in a species. We exist as a people, one whole people, seeking one shared end. And part of our nature is to do that collectively. We actually can't achieve the greatest goods in life alone. That's not just only for this good. There's lots of goods that work that way. Can't achieve wisdom that way on your own, for example. Have to do it in society. And it's just a sociological fact that we pursue our last end together in society. That's why there's religions in every culture. You might think about religions in this sense as communities that we create to do natural theology together, to construct narratives of meaning, to try to grapple with what is God, or what are the gods, and where are they, and why are we here, and where are we going? Communities that we collect, we build together, trying to worship that thing somehow, to show it respect, reverence, love, fear. So the way the natural theologies work in all religions, very different. And the way worship works across religions is pretty different, although there's some basic common features. But you could think about each religion as a human collective attempt to reach God and to understand God and to enter into relationship with God, the transcendent, the one, the beyond, the everything, the whatever. If you see religions this way, then you're always going to have to worry about this problem here. If they really are just human creations, all religions are just us grappling with these big questions, then we're going to get some things right. Maybe we're going to get a lot of things wrong. This would give you a basis for understanding why the different religions of history believe different things, teach different things, do different things. And not just different in the sense of, oh, that's a cool variation, but sometimes directly contradictory to each other. It's possible, before you bring faith and revelation and whatnot into the picture, it's possible that every religion on earth is just a mix of true and false, and they're all wrong somehow. That's possible, if they're just created by us. But even the weirdest ones, they all have some idea of the transcendent, of the holy, of origin of existence somehow, in a limited way perhaps, goal, end, purpose. Maybe not for the whole universe, but at some level. They're all different degrees of right or wrong. Now, I want to emphasize this last point at the bottom of the page. All of this talk about history of religions as an expression of us seeking our last end and as a thing that we create, that's not necessarily the only explanation for religion. For example, obviously, I hope this class is all about the idea that God came down from heaven and revealed and said things, gave us the answers to these questions and said, no, no, this is right. Do this. This is how you worship. This is what I am. Follow me. Not every religion makes a claim like that. Some do, some do not. I would say some do, most do not, but it depends on how you want to define religion. But also, we didn't spend a lot of time this year talking about angels and demons. We did a little. This also gives us a really interesting a way to think about why religions differ in so many ways. It's not just that humans are fallible and humans are wounded by original sin, and therefore we get lots of things wrong about God. Because this is such an important thing for us, it's really the most important thing about human life is to get all of this right. It's the number one thing that the demonic would be interested in leading astray. So you could think about some religions as shams, con jobs by villains. You could think about some religions as honest attempts at constructing some sort of, community of natural theology and worship like I've described. And it just happens to fall short and be wrong. You could also think about them as being inspired in some way by the demonic, by supernatural creatures putting on shows, tricking people into worshiping them. These explanations actually work together. They're not at odds with each other. This is a really important thing in the Old Testament. We actually looked at this when we were in 7th grade together, for those of you that were here. The Old Testament is pretty ambiguous about this. Sometimes we talk about the Canaanite religions as their gods as being false. They can't do anything. But other times it's really clear that they're real. They're just not God. They're just less. They can't actually bring about the existence of the universe. They're creations as well. But then again, you get things like Micah and the Levite, for those of you that have good memories, where a dude just, melts some silver and makes a statue and says, look, a god, and you begin to worship it. That runs throughout the entire Old Testament, beyond the things that we read. It's a really common theme in the prophet Isaiah. It's also a really important thing in Catholic history. St. Augustine does a lot with this in his book, City of God, where when he's talking about the Roman religions, the Roman gods are either not real because you guys made them up and they're not going to help you any, or they are real and they've done nothing but trouble you for all of the centuries that you've been worshiping them because they're demonic. And either way, we should probably stop trying to rely on that and turn toward, the source and origin of all things, the thing that created them. So actually what you see throughout the history of Christianity up until modern secularism, which calls into question the existence of all of these things, is the idea that possibly all of the gods are real, possibly. I personally think they all exist in some way or another, not just as human constructs, but as real creatures that really did things on earth to get people to worship them, because that's the number one way you shipwreck humans and ruin their lives. And you get these grand Catholic artists, whether it's someone like Dante or whether someone like Ariosto, putting together a cosmology where all of the creatures of Roman mythology are either angels serving God or demons trying to thwart him. So the history of religions picture here isn't meant to be exhaustive. We're just trying to say a couple of basic things about where they come from. At least part of the story is this, our human quest for God in community. Possibly we're going to have to take into account things like the demonic screwing that up, and we'll have to take into account the fallibility of humans screwing it up. And then ultimately, for the complete picture, we also have to worry about God coming down from heaven and giving us the answer. Okay, I've gone just a bit over 20 minutes, so I'm going to stop there. It's a good slide to end on. Just as a quick preview, we're going to jump ahead to the next big thing, which is talking about the paradox of life and death. But 20 minutes, I think, is all you need to listen to in a single go. That leads me to believe this PowerPoint series will take 3 lectures, but I guess that depends on how much I'm going to talk. So learn it and stay safe and have fun. And that shall be the end of